Welcome to No Visible Bruises, the podcast that shares real-life survivor stories of narcissistic abuse, domestic abuse, and coercive control from a physiology-first and nervous system perspective, because you can't think your way out of this. You need to feel to heal. I'm Caroline Strawson, a survivor myself and now a trauma expert and educator. I am here to create change and understanding of the unseen abuse that we are not taught about in schools, and to heal from the inside out at a nervous system level. Let's break the silence and change the narrative, because we heal together. If you ever have wondered why, is your childhood related to the adult abusive relationships that you find yourself in? You need to listen to today's episode where I'm interviewing Radka Crossley, and you will see literally how the transition from her childhood into adulthood absolutely contributed to her finding herself in these abusive relationships. We're lifting the shame, we're lifting the guilt and blame, and you need to listen to this episode if you feel like, why do I keep ending up in these abusive relationships? So Radka, I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here on No Visible Bruises today, a true survivor, because not only do I know you obviously from being a fellow survivor, but also you're doing some of my coaching programs and certifications as well, because like me, you want to go out and make a difference. So it's my absolute honor and pleasure to have you on our podcast here today. Welcome.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. I can't believe I'm here. Yeah, it is nerve-wracking for me, but the joy of being here and being able to share my story, and it's
and I think inspiring. And we were just kind of talking before we started rolling that the importance of stories like yours, a woman who has experienced a lot of abuse in relationships throughout your life and to where you are now, and the importance of sharing these survivor stories to give those that are maybe at the start of their journey, not even realizing maybe they're in an abusive relationship, and to have you here today as an inspiration for others to see what is possible, I think is so wonderful. And I know that's something you personally really want to get across too, that the hope beyond all of this. But let's kind of track back. When do you think you noticed the first abusive relationship that you were in?
Well, it took me a while to piece that together, to actually wake up to the fact that I was in one. It was my marriage. I was married for 18 years. And, coming where I came from, I suppose I just kind of took that as normal,
So talk to me a bit about that. So for you being in this marriage, it was normal. Where did that come from? What was it about your past before your relationship then that felt like that was normal? Tell me a little bit more about what led up to that.
Well, it was basically growing up in the home that I did. My mom was an alcoholic. My parents divorced when I was maybe 4 or 5, and she remarried, and that was quite an abusive marriage that she was in. There was a lot of drinking, a lot of fighting, and a lot of adultery and all of that happening. And I grew up among alcoholics, basically, not just my mom and my stepdad.
What was that like as a child, being brought up in that environment? Did you recognize as a child that this didn't feel normal, or did it actually feel normal to you?
I guess it felt normal. There was no one that I actually, at the time, I didn't know. But looking back, I know there was no one that I had emotional safety with. So you were just kind of alone with all that you were feeling. But to me, that seemed normal. But I guess, looking back, it wasn't, because, you go to school, all the other children are happy, they come to school laughing. And
did you go to school laughing?
Not necessarily, not a lot, not many times. And,
Did anyone notice? Did any of the teachers notice that maybe things weren't right for you at home?
I don't know. To look back, I'm not too sure. Well, nobody did anything. You know, I mean, I was turning up at school. I did really well at school, and I just, wanted to perform because that's where I placed my value at, And
yeah, what a great point. Yeah, the value in being good at school. And I think this is really, really important. And I wish we had teachers listening to this right now. You were showing up to school, you were performing at school, yet at home it was really dysfunctional.
Yeah, it was. And to me, it was the norm. So as a child, you don't get to question it because you don't have the capacity to think, is this actually okay or not?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I grew up, and that's how I entered adulthood, thinking this is what to expect from a relationship.
So what happened? So you had this childhood then around alcoholism, and I just want to pause a second. I know we said emotions are welcome here, and I think I'd just really like to honour that little girl who experienced that. Would it be okay just to spend a bit of moment and just to allow us to feel all of that too?
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes, we can say all of these things, but we often don't give space to feel all of these things. And it almost feels a disservice to that younger part of you, that little girl who went through that really tough experience of growing up around alcoholics and dysfunction. What are you noticing in your body at the moment, Radka?
Well, at the moment, I'm at peace because I've made peace with all this a long, long time ago. But first time I said the word, my mum was an alcoholic. It's like the world just disappeared from under my feet. It just become so tiny. So I do remember that feeling, when it was.
So I can really sense the emotion with all of this. So what's coming up for you right now? What's that emotion meaning for you?
It's loneliness. You feel alone. Sadness.
Is that alone and sadness from when you were a child, or does it feel very present now?
No, not present at the moment. That's from
that little girl.
Then,
Yeah. Let's just honour that sense of aloneness that she felt, not having a mum that maybe noticed her and was there for her as such, through her own stuff likely too, as I'm sure you know now. Yeah. But for that little girl experiencing all of that, what do you think a little girl would feel about herself if she notices that her parents aren't fully present with her?
Well, you don't feel like whatever you do is enough. You just try and you look for things to keep your parents happy, but nothing really seems to land with them,
Yeah, and I think you can tend to find then at school. I mean, I was certainly like a high achiever and things like this, because you try and find your sense of worth elsewhere, don't you?
Absolutely, yeah. And I did. I was really... And it came very easily for me. It's not like I had to try to prove to someone that I'm good at school. It just came very easily. I think that's what it was. The teachers saw I was doing well, so they assumed there was no problem.
You're the good girl then. Nothing wrong with you because you're doing well. And I think when we're talking about being trauma-informed, isn't it? The good girl in the classroom that isn't disruptive. And same for, all genders. But at the end of the day, you are likely in a freeze response then, doing all the things, functioning as such. But actually, beyond all of that, there was a little girl who didn't feel good enough and was trying to prove her worth in her schoolwork.
Absolutely. And, the bullying and all of that. So, yeah, you were tiny. And
what age did the bullying start at school?
I was quite young. Yeah, very young. And it was what stands out to me, that kids used to pick on me because of, the way I looked, the way I dressed, because, and one day there were these two girls from 2 years above me who actually stood up for me. I was probably about 8 then.
Gosh.
I felt huge in that moment. I could not believe that somebody actually, put the bullies down for me.
Wow, those two. Wouldn't you like to welcome them and say thank you very much now? If only everybody was like that, right?
Yeah, but it wasn't much of an outright bullying, but it was like, the sniggers behind your back and not having the friends.
And that on a daily, again, interestingly, there's that sort of, it wasn't that bad, or it wasn't this. And we see this in the adult abusive relationship. Oh, yeah, it's not that bad. Oh, they didn't do this as such. And actually, if there's a right or a wrong. Bullying is wrong.
Yeah.
Abuse is wrong. It's not on a spectrum as such. So it's really interesting there where, it just wasn't that bad, a bit of sniggering. No, it was that bad for you.
Yeah, obviously at the time you don't go, well, I'm bullied less than the next girl, so I'm okay. No, it feels just as awful to you at the time.
And that must have been almost feeling like when you were saying those feelings of not feeling enough, and that the bullying almost was feeding into all of that. Well, maybe I'm not good enough, then I'm now being bullied as such as well.
Yeah,
that must be really difficult as a child growing up. You've got this dysfunctional family and then you're being bullied at school. And I'm just thinking, again, Radka, of all those kids out there now, and even those that are listening that are adults that have had the same experience of you as you, of the hope you are going to give them, that if they're still stuck of where they can get to next. So we have the bullying. And then what? If we're looking at a timeline then of the sort of dysfunctional alcoholism, things like this, and the divorce, bullying at school, and this, young girl feeling not good enough. When were your first kind of romantic relationships? What age did they start to happen for you?
Probably about 19, the first boyfriend.
And what was that like?
I don't remember much, if I'm honest. It just seems like a lot of that period of my life just got switched off in my brain. It just didn't seem significant compared to what happened later on in my life. So yeah, it was okay, but didn't last, and I ended up coming to England, in 94. I made my life here. I had a great few years and got
Did that feel good?
Yeah.
Was that good when you moved here?
It was, because nobody knew me. It was like I could literally...
Fresh start.
I could be anyone, and nobody knew what I've come from and what I've gone through.
And where had you come from? What was the country you'd come from?
Czech Republic.
Okay. So a big difference then.
Very much so, yeah. Back then anyway, 30 years ago, 31.
Yeah. So we're in a brand new country. And interestingly, when you said about being in that country, I could almost sense your body feeling a lightness in that as such. I kind of felt the heaviness. So when we were talking about your childhood and the bullying, and then moving to England almost felt like, there was a kind of lightness to that. Did you notice that shift in your body there?
I did. And it was like liberation in a way, and I made loads of amazing friends, and some of them are still my friends now. So yeah.
How much of your life, so I'm interested, Radka, when you moved here, knowing sort of the life you'd had, how much of that did you share with anybody? Did you keep it quite quiet? Did you make stuff up? Did you kind of create a persona? What was that like? Because obviously, like you say, nobody knew you. So what did you share?
Nothing about my private life at all, I don't think.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. And when I first met my husband, and then he came over back to Czech Republic with me.
Was he British?
Yes. He came with me, and he came to my home, which was nerve-wracking for me. And, he got into my house, and he goes, afterwards, why did you not tell me your mom was an alcoholic? And I'm like, how do you even share that with someone? How do I say that?
Why do you think you didn't share? So you'd met somebody, you were having an intimate relationship with them. What do you think was stopping you from sharing that?
Shame. The simple shame.
Yeah. What does shame feel like in your body when you think about that?
It silences everything. It just constricts. I can't even hear it in my voice now. Just speaking the word shame is like your words want to disappear. I can hear it. You probably can hear it in my voice. It just gets.
I can see it in your emotions and stuff too.
Yeah, there's a lot of shame around that.
Do you still feel that shame about your mom?
No. When I first, basically, my friend came around years later, and I told her, I was just speaking, and I said my mom's an alcoholic, and then I'm like, where did that go from? How did I just say that? And since then I realised, that's okay to say, because it's not my fault.
Where do you think? Yes, and I just want to pull that up there, because what's really interesting when we talk about shame and fault and everything else. So my question was going to be, why do you think you didn't share with your partner that your mum was an alcoholic? So when you said shame, I want to go one step further with that. What was the root underneath the shame that you felt may or may not happen if you shared that? Where was the shame coming from?
It's probably judgment. You know, people are going to judge you.
Okay. Yeah, understandable, isn't it?
Yeah, that still sits with me. I'm done with the shame and things, but I still sit with this judgment feeling.
Okay. So what does that feel like in your body? So when we kind of ask about underneath the shame, because you could kind of share about that, we could feel the emotion with that. And now we've kind of moved on to the judgment piece. And again, I can notice the hands going a bit cortisol going in our body now as such. What is it about judgment? So judgment, remember, is a part of us, a protector part of us. So if you had to separate yourself from that judgment part of you, Radka, why is it there? Why do you think it's showing up for you? What's its role for you?
Oh, it's definitely to keep me small, to keep me insignificant and not that visible. I know it's there. And I don't think it's just the family dynamics for me growing up. It's also where I grew up, because there was communism and nobody's really meant to stick out, you know.
Yeah.
And I think culturally it's a country where people were really envious of others when they did a little better because nobody had anything. So I think there's a lot of shame about trying to do a little better or different than everybody else.
It was almost like a better life or success bred danger in some respects, because then people might talk about you, or something bad might happen, like you say, in communist times as such. You know, everybody's the same unless you're the elite as such, or the government as such as well. And and I think when we're talking about trauma and it's the cultural trauma around that too, and the country that you're living in can feed into all of that as well. So it's not only your home, it's the environment and the country you're living in at the time as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And I've had people around me who would openly say, you know, there's someone who's doing well, I don't know, someone famous on TV, I hate them. And you ask, why do you hate them? Because they're rich, because they've got this, they've got that. Wow. You know, and so you grow up listening to those things, so you immediately think, I can't do better than anyone else, because that's just going to...
Success is danger. If I'm successful, people will think bad stuff about me. Yeah. And if you're not feeling great about yourself because of your childhood, it's like, well, we don't want to feed into that even more. So I understand now why that judgment part was there, to try and keep you small, to keep you safe as such.
Absolutely.
God, aren't our systems amazing that they, we would often feel irritation or frustration parts of us around stopping ourselves from being successful. That's why we obviously love using internal family systems in our work, because it gives us a different lens, a trauma lens to look through, where we can see these parts of us that we might feel shame about, we might feel disdain for, but actually they're always there with a really good reason. And that judgment part of yours, Radka, was to keep you small, to try and keep you safe, to stop you feeling not good enough.
Yes. And I throughout my childhood at school, if bit of my personality, because I do stupid things just because they feel good. And sometimes I did
we all do that. We all do stupid things.
And if I would do that, kids would laugh at me. I'm like, okay, so let's not do that again. So whenever I did try and show my personality, you just kind of feel like, oh, that didn't go down too well. So you just keep yourself.
Reinforces it again. Yeah. Stay small, stay silent, just blend in as such. Don't put your head above the parapet. I see this a lot with a lot of people I work with who do come from cultures or religions where there's a lot of suppression with that too, where putting your head above the parapet. And that's not just in everyday life. It's in business, it's in relationships. There's an element of needing to stay small to stay safe.
Absolutely.
And it's really common, and it can be really hard, and many people are still living like that. And again, it's really great that you're here, you're being visible, you're sharing all of these things, because there will be people right now that feel small, that feel silenced, and however much they want to step out of that, it feels dangerous, because what if people say bad stuff about you? I mean, people say bad stuff about you walking down the street, right? But if we've got those core wounds that are really strong within us, those parts are going to work really strong for us not to do that. So I get then why you wouldn't disclose that to your partner there. So obviously you went out there, took your partner back to the Czech Republic. What was that like? Did he meet your mother then as well?
Yeah, that is 20 odd years ago. I don't know, 27 years ago, 28. So a long time ago. Yeah. And he used to love it. He used to come with me, visiting my family once he got to know, the dynamics of it. They did like him too, because he could be a very, likable personality, and he did fit in very well. Yes.
Yeah, I bet. Saying what they all wanted to hear. So he was, isn't he lovely, Radka? He's so nice. Already at that stage, feeding into all of that.
Yes, and he also did drink considerably, which also felt normal to me at the time. I was
going to say, yeah, normal.
But at the time when we were together, he wasn't an alcoholic yet. So I basically went into it knowing I can save him.
So why do you think you did that? Because again, when we talk about these completion of response cycles and stuff, and I think it's really interesting for our audience to hear these stories of, because they'll relate to this, the fixer, the rescuer. We want to help and please people because we are those types that end up sadly in these types of relationships. And what's really interesting then is you knew he drank, but you thought you could help. Where was that switch, do you think, for you, where you realized, okay, he's not going to stop, and it was like dipping into alcoholism? And then what was that relationship like?
No, that was years. It took me the entire marriage of 18 years for me to just go, I can't do anything here. All I'm doing is trying to help someone, is break myself. But it took all of that time, because the entire time I believed, yes, I can do this, I can save him the shame of, divorcing or leaving my marriage, because my dad's marriage is they both remarried, they both divorced again. I'm not like that. That's not going to happen to me. I will make this work. And that was what kept me above water. I was so determined to make this work. And, it took me 15 years to realize I'm not gonna make it work, am I? And then it took another few years to actually put up the courage.
And I think it's a really good point to mention here, because, and I was the same, I was married for 14 years. And I think people think when you realize things aren't right in a relationship, it's like, well, just leave then. But it's not as easy as that, is it, Radka? No. You'd had it where your parents had been divorced, so you didn't want to do that. I'd had the opposite, where my parents hadn't been divorced, so I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to shame the family as such, and getting a divorce. And what I find really interesting is that both you and I stayed in marriages that probably, as the marriages were progressing, realized they weren't right, but we kept trying to fix it. We stayed as such. But recognizing that these were not healthy marriages, but we still stayed. So when people are out judging others, and I think this is the point that I'd really like to make, Radka, is when people stay in these relationships, it's not as easy as just thinking, just leave. There's trauma bonding, there's childhood experiences, it's layered and it's complex. And the shame sometimes, I don't know about you, Radka, but when I came out of my relationship, I don't know whether you felt the same, knowing that it had been really dysfunctional in that relationship, I kept thinking, why was I so stupid for staying in for so long? I don't know whether you felt the same.
Yeah, I had a couple of years of feeling shame and guilt and, around my children, I've kept them in this for so long. It was a massive, massive eye-opener for me. I thought, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to leave. I'm going to be okay. But then for months and years, I just had to battle with this shame and guilt.
What do you think stopped you? So there'll be people listening now, maybe knowing their relationship isn't right either. And obviously you were years down the line with that before anything happened. Where was that in your marriage of 18 years? Where do you think in that time you really started to think, okay, this isn't good? Not that you left at that point, but what were the things that led up where you really started to feel like, yeah, this isn't a good marriage? How soon was it? How late was it?
It was very soon. it was very soon when I thought, I don't like the way this is going. But it took me years to stop wanting to make it work and realize that I can't make it work if the other person's not trying. Literally years. And I remember when my daughter was just a few weeks old, I was on the phone with my aunt crying and saying, this is not good, and she was asking me to leave because she'd had to do the same. She was married to an awful person. And and I didn't leave until my daughter was 11, so literally another 11 years until I actually took my aunt's words. And what was the one thing that made me say, okay, I'm done? It's the simplest thing. I was driving my kids to school first thing in the morning through this estate where there's a lot of very tight people living. And I saw this couple who were maybe in their 90s and they were walking hand in hand first thing in the morning. And I thought, I'm never going to have that. It's never going to be me. And I want that. I want to be able to do this when I'm that old. And
let's just feel that for a moment, because I can really feel that emotion in the room, this sense of driving along with your kids in the back and everything and seeing this 90-year-old old couple holding hands. What are you noticing with your emotions? What sensations are coming up for you there, Radka?
The heat's rising into my head, and it's just sitting down there, still there in my heart.
Yeah, so let's just notice that for a moment. Let's just honour that part of you that feels that. Because again, we often suppress and we move on and everything else, but it just feels like, a pause of let's just feel that emotion for a moment. If those tears that you're noticing and feeling, if they had a voice, what do you think they'd be saying about this?
It's okay. I think this is hard because obviously I've done a lot of work and with you and before I came across you. So, I know where I'm at now, but at the time it was the guilt of keeping myself in for as long as I did. Okay.
So if we had to ask that guilty part, because it's interesting this, and and again, I know so many will relate to it because I can relate to it as well, right? That, what you're saying there is you knew quite early on in your marriage that things weren't right. Okay. So what is it for someone in that moment to know things aren't right, but then stay another 11 years? And then a guilty part of you in these moments are recognizing that you're feeling guilty about staying and things like this. Okay. Or even guilty about leaving.
Well, that's it, isn't it? It's so confusing because you feel guilty for wanting to leave, then you feel guilty for not having left. So
it's like we're gaslighting ourselves, isn't it? And maybe we are, because if we've got these polarized parts of us almost arguing, leave, stay, what are you doing? All of those things. What is it distracting us away from feeling about ourselves?
The core wounds, isn't it? It's like all of this that's happening to me right now stops me from really seeing what's going on for me inside of me. The feeling that no matter what I do, I'm not good enough. This is where you're at. So you outsource all your focus onto other things and other people, and you go, okay, let's have a guilt to work with.
It is, and I think this is really important in. Often when we go and see, say, therapists or coaches, when we're experiencing things like narcissistic abuse, domestic abuse, coercive control, and you can go and see somebody and they will work with you on that relationship, how you feel about it, all of those things. But actually, what we need to be looking at for really true and deep healing, and I know you know this, Radka, with the work that you do now, but it really does take us back to our childhood. I know people listening to my podcast might think, Caroline, why do you keep talking about people's childhoods? If we're talking about adult, toxic, abusive relationships, why do you keep going back to childhood? For a reason, because there's often a root cause of between the ages of sort of 2 and 7 where we shape those beliefs about ourselves. We then shape the relationships that we end up in. Just like you had that feeling of not being good enough from your childhood, factor in obviously the Czech Republic, the country, the communism side of all of this, leading you into this adult relationship as such of feeling not good enough. It felt normal to you being in these types of relationships, this dysfunction. So that was your version of love. That was your version of normal, your version of safety almost. And then when we talk about sort of the guilty part showing up for you in these moments and the kind of, I'm guilty if I stay, I'm guilty if I leave. If we ask that guilty part as the adult now, why is it there? What would that guilty part say now?
Yeah, you didn't look after yourself in that moment. You let yourself down. I mean, the work we do, I understand a lot of things now that I didn't at the time. I didn't even know what my emotions were because I had nobody around me that would be an emotional support. So I didn't understand my emotions. All I could understand was shame and guilt. But all of the other ones, I had no idea whether, how to work with them. I had no idea that I am not responsible for my husband's emotions. Yeah. I basically believe that if he's full of rage, that's because I've done something or said something or just even looked in a certain way. And at the time, I didn't know all of those things.
That's hard to live a life like that, feeling like you are the reason why someone else drinks or doesn't feel happy. That's a huge pressure on yourself, isn't it?
It is. At the time, you don't see that that's not the way it is. But that's what your question before. Why do we stay? When people say, why don't you just leave? Because you don't know what you don't know. You don't realize that this is not your fault. You do believe, you are made believe that you are the reason, and you feel obviously the responsibility to make it better, to fix it, because if you've caused it, you're going to have to stay and you're going to have to put it right.
And this is a part of the dynamic in these abusive relationships. It's a slow erosion of your sense of self, leaving you feeling like it's your fault and it's your responsibility to make it better because of very often the core wounds that we have experienced and interpreted from our own childhoods, where the core of our beliefs are formed.
Absolutely, yeah. And if you grow up not even understanding any of your feelings or your emotions, you don't know how to handle someone else's, and you do stay, and you don't know to look back and think, okay, so I've done this behavior because of what happened to me when I was little. You don't put the 2 and 2 together when you live in that dynamic.
Don't, because we're not taught actually that our childhoods really are the shapers for who we become as adults. And then we're not taught how we can change that in the correct fashion. Often it's just talking about it, but you've got to feel to heal. You've got to work at a sort of physiology first level, the bottom up level, not just top down talking about it, And I know you and I both know in the work that we both do, it's really about, which is why we bring it back to those sensations. We bring it back to the nervous system. You don't think anxiety, you don't think depression, you feel it. So we have to work in the body at those stages to have that sort of movement forward, so to speak. So when you realized sort of would you say it was around the 7-year mark then when you thought, actually, really, this isn't, or was it even prior to that?
It probably was, but at the time I still kept hoping it will be better, and then obviously we had our daughter, and that was even less of a chance for me to just up and leave, because I didn't want her to have a broken home,
Isn't our language in society, broken home, single mother? I mean, gosh, talk about demonizing us if we go through a divorce or something. It's just such a horrible phraseology around it, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, looking back now, yes, I can see it. At the time, I was in a very different place. So, yeah, you stay because you think you're doing the right thing. So what sort of things did you do to try and make it better? What were some of the things you did? In the marriage? Yeah. I just kept silence, really, I think. Wow. It was hard because, for example, I was just thinking about this driving down here. We would have discussions on things, and I would get ripped apart for having an opinion. So if I then got invited into a discussion, I'm like, I don't want this. So I just said, I don't really know. I'm not sure it matters. Then I got ripped apart for not having an opinion, so you just can't win. So
goodness me. What are you noticing in your body? Because it's really interesting as I'm watching it. I don't know if people are watching this on YouTube or Spotify, whether they notice this on camera. As I'm watching your body language going through all of this, there's like a bit of a startle response going there. There's a bit of looking down going there. It's like I'm watching your body in those situations with your ex, like, well, what do I do? Like startle response. What do I do? Oh no, I need to stay silent. I need to say this. And it's really interesting. And if you've watched this on Spotify or YouTube, rewind it back and look at Radka's body language there, because I can spot it as stuff. And I think this is the thing, the body keeps score, right? The great book by Bessel van der Kolk. It really does. And that those sensations and body movements and impulses, they're imprinted in that moment. So when you shared all that, you were telling me the words, but your body was like it was in that situation as well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And also I do know that I am very expressive with my I'm struggling not to knock the mic.
Hey, this is hard for me as well. I mean, you know me, and I'm always gesticulating everywhere. Yeah, I think I've got used to the mic there and stuff now. So
I absolutely do talk with my body, and I know that sometimes it lets things slide that I perhaps wanted to keep inside, but yeah.
7% of our communication is in words. That's why when we do the somatic work and we, which is what we do, and really understanding the body and the nervous system, we can notice a lot without any spoken words.
And also, you when you know this work, you kind of start checking yourself in, because I sometimes say things that cognitively I think is what I mean to say. And then my body does something. I'm like, oh, yeah, maybe that's not how I really feel.
But that's taken work for you, hasn't it? That's taken that sense of awareness. And I think, the hope of people watching and listening can see where you are now. And we're kind of, talking about your childhood, your experiences, your marriage, and realizing. And I just want to kind of go back to, because I can, even when you were sharing this, Radka, I could feel it off you as such, that sense of, and the word is eggshells, the being of eggshells in that relationship of, do I say this? Do I not say it? Do I do this? Do I not do that? And I know I can relate to that. And I know so many others will relate to this too, that feeling of, I don't know what to say or do, because whatever I say or do is likely to be wrong. And what is it like living in a relationship, feeling like I don't know whether I say or do anything and if it's right or not, and what are the consequences of that?
You just constantly tense. You just, like you say, walking on eggshell, it physically feels like that. You are like this all the time, and you're scanning like your brain. Is that the right thing for me to speak out? Should I keep that quiet? You just can't say what's on your mind, because it will come out wrong. There's thousands of examples, but it seems like nothing,
What does that do to you over the years of feeling like you're on this eggshells? And like you say, you're tense, you're kind of like, what do I do? And it's almost like you're in like a freeze thinking, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. Am I going to get it right? Am I going to get it wrong as such? Because again, if people don't understand trauma, they might think, well, come on, pull yourself together. You're an adult. Just say what you want, do what you want. But it's not as easy as that, is it?
No, and I think it comes down to, the attachment styles, because if you grow up in a secure home and you have the good sense of self, and you are in that situation where someone is mistreating you, or you feel mistreated, they may not be mistreating you, you feel mistreated, you go, I don't like this, and you walk away. But if you have been given no sense of self, and you grow up thinking, well, whatever you do is not good enough, so this is how you're going to be for the rest of your life, you don't know that leaving can make you, put you in a better place, can make you, more rounded,
because you'd been conditioned of breadcrumbs of love were good enough. And I think when we're in these relationships, the thought of almost, which sounds ridiculous to others if they don't understand this, that surely just being in no relationship and loving yourself, that's the pinnacle as such. But if you don't know, like you said, if you've got no sense of self and you haven't learned how to love yourself, to know that you're good enough and worthy enough and important and lovable enough just for being who you are, breadcrumbs of love in an abusive relationship are still better than none.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah, that's where I was. It is that you feel that's all you deserve. And you feel like if I leave this space, I won't be even getting the breadcrumbs. So, because you're not aware at the time that you can give more to yourself if you're not in that dynamic. So to you, that seems more than enough because you don't feel you deserve more than that. And I think it's that simple. And
I think, again, Radka, it's talking about that, when we talk about things like narcissistic abuse, domestic abuse, and coercive control, and we look at it as a sort of adult issue sometimes, and we look at it more of children witnessing almost narcissistic abuse, domestic abuse, and coercive control. And again, we can look at the semantics of that, of ages and stuff too. But actually, when you entered your relationship with your husband, the wounds were already there. The foundation was already there of how you felt about yourself. And I think this is an important point where we often think the narcissist, the abuser, the perpetrator, they're the trauma. They're the ones making you feel a certain way. And I think what's really important to highlight from a responsibility and power for us within perspective is they're not the trauma. Your ex-husband wasn't necessarily the trauma. Your experience was abusive, but your ex-husband was actually shining a great big spotlight on those core wounds that you had about yourself that had been formed in your childhood.
Absolutely. And this is something that took me years afterwards, leaving that marriage.
Me too.
It's like you live in that state of victimhood for a long time. Then you're blaming yourself and you put shame on yourself for staying and for not doing more.
Or you get angry and think, how dare they? All right. And you're kind of mixing it all up, right?
All of it. And, it took me years to wake up and go, I can see the part I played in my own suffering. And I think when you get to that stage, that's where healing can begin because you turn the focus on yourself.
Yeah. And I think it's important there as well. It's not necessarily the part you play in it because you didn't choose your parents. You didn't choose these things. This is biology, really. Biologically, as children, we're in a different brainwave state, receiving information to shape how we feel about ourselves. So if for whatever reasons our parents or our caregivers are incapable of showing us a healthy sense of self, maybe for whatever they've experienced in their own childhood too, this isn't anybody's fault as such. Although, when we're talking about abuse and from childhood and neglect and things, there's always a choice in all of these things. But when we're talking about ownership or responsibility and victimhood, and I think this is a really great conversation to have, and I think it's a sensitive conversation to have, but I think it's a necessary one. And I'm really glad you brought that up, Radka, in, that kind of sense of ownership and responsibility of our own healing, I think is, like you said, hard to come to because very often we sit there and we are looking at the abuser as it's their fault. And they are the reason why we feel the way we do, in that they are shining a spotlight on how we feel about ourselves. But if we're only sitting in a space of, I feel like this because of them, we're missing a really crucial part of our own healing, aren't we?
Absolutely. It took a long time to be able to say those words, but yes, because you don't want to accept that. I could have done things for myself. I could have started my healing. It wasn't my fault what happened to me while I was a child. It wasn't my fault what was happening to me in the marriage, but it was my responsibility to heal my wounds.
But sometimes we're not ready at those points, are we? No. It's got to be at the right time. And, I don't want people listening right now to think, oh, I should do this now. You know what? You do it when it feels safe enough and right enough for you in that moment. And we're not here to say now is the right time. What we're here to say is just hold that sense of curiosity about when the right time might be.
Absolutely. It's absolutely not to shame anyone for not having done it, because
we feel that anyway, right?
Yeah,
we do that to ourselves.
It's that shame and the guilt I felt, around my children after I left, for staying that long and putting them through it, and all of this, and then the shame for not doing more. But all of that's gone once you realize I can heal myself. Shame goes, guilt goes, and you just grateful, like you said. I don't know if grateful is the right word, but you appreciate the lessons, and you appreciate the growth that it kind of brings you towards. And there's no shame in how long it takes, because some people see it immediately. Some take years before they wake up to the fact that I can see what I could be doing for myself now.
It's hard. And I think when children are involved and finances as well, we kind of feel like we're doing the right thing by staying. Maybe we have experienced financial abuse and we're totally reliant on a partner as well. That can be really challenging and isolating for so many. And I just think it's such a great message that you're giving there, Radka, around that piece of responsibility and ownership, not in the abuse that you've experienced, but in the ownership of, if I don't want to feel like this anymore, only I can change that. Yeah. Can't change them, but I can work on how I feel about their treatment of me. So rather than me always seeing the abuse as a reflection of me because I'm not good enough, I can work on that. That's the power, isn't it, for us as survivors? It's not in changing the abusive behavior of those that perpetrate that against us. What it is how we see that abuse. We can change the interpretation of how we see that as no longer a reflection of our worth, because they're going to do that anyway. Because most will not change, which I know is controversial, but show me the evidence of how many actually change, because not many do. They may do for a while. They may play lip service for things, depending on if it serves their own needs. But there's not a lot of evidence, primarily for many abusers, that they will change for whatever reason, their childhood, whatever we want to call that as such. So I think this is why it's important to hear stories like yourself, where the hope is not in changing them, because we tried, right? We tried to change them and fix them and rescue them. It's about how we feel about ourselves with how they are with us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the only thing you can do. You are the only person you can work on, and all you can change is how you respond and react to things. How
did that happen for you? So that moment then when you realized, like you were saying about, you were kind of sitting in a bit of that victimhood and it's everybody else's fault as such. What was the catalyst, do you think, for you to really step into your own healing journey, to really think, do you know what? If it's going to be, it's up to me. I need to do this for me and I need to work on myself, as opposed to just carrying on, knowing that had happened and doing nothing about it.
Well, I think that the seed actually got planted before I even left by my stepmom, because I was, towards the end of the marriage, I was telling her just how unhappy I was and how I can't do anything to change him and all of this. And she said, well, people come to this planet to walk their own path, and it's nobody's business to wear them off that path. And you can choose to walk with them, or you can choose to walk your own, because that's all you can do. You have the choice to follow or not, and you have to decide, if I follow, will I be happy on that path, or is that not my path? And she planted that seed, and it didn't sink in for another maybe 2 years. But when we started doing, it was in lockdown, and, these people suddenly started appearing on my Facebook, including yourself and your workshop. And I started working with a lady on EFT.
So the tapping.
Yes, that's emotional freedom technique. So I'm certified in that now, because it literally changed my life. But at the time, what I was looking for was support for my daughter, because she was going
and that often starts, doesn't it? We forget about ourselves, but we want to make it right for our kids.
Yes, absolutely. And she was really struggling at the time. And then we were locked in the house, And things were dire at the time. I just couldn't see a way out.
COVID was hard, wasn't it, for abusive relationships?
For abusive relationship, I cannot imagine what that must have been like for people. But I was out of the relationship for 5 years by then. But I knew that we can't carry on the way we were, because it was, this is an awful thing to say, but I saw snippets of my husband's behavior in my daughter, and it was
we often
triggering.
see that. We often see that. And that can be hard as a parent, isn't it? Where you see, and I think, again, there'll be people listening to this feeling like that, but not wanting to verbalize it or lean into it, because what does that mean about them as a parent then?
Yeah, it was hugely triggering. It was like stepping back, and I thought I'd left this, and that brought me to seek out help for her. And I spoke to one lady, a hypnotherapist, and she said, well, I can help you this way. No, I don't need help. I need help for my daughter.
Oh, isn't it interesting? Talk about abandoning yourself in those moments. Yeah. And we do. I think as parents, again, particularly women, we are conditioned to be the nurturers, the carers. So if we're not looking after them, we're a bad mother. And actually, it has to start with us, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And when she said, when you're ready to help yourself, you know where I am. I'm like, how dare she say that to me? I'm all right. And then, I came across Rachel Earing is her name. She's amazing. So she was bringing out this new EFT methodology, and she just popped up. And I didn't know her at the time. I had no idea what she was talking about, but I thought, I'll take anything. Right now, I'll take any help. And then I started to see what that hypnotherapist meant about helping yourself, because I'm like, oh, right, I get it.
The good old oxygen mask analogy. You've got to put your own oxygen mask on first if you want to help others, including your kids.
Absolutely. So through that, I started to heal. And it wasn't because I wanted help for me. I wanted help for my daughter. But then I realized, actually, no, I need to. There's a lot in here that needs to heal.
I think this is really crucial for us as parents to recognize, because I think, like you, like me, we try and do the best for our children, or what we think is the best for our children, and we're doing it with the bestest of intentions, and I think all of this is about forgiving our younger selves for that which we didn't know at the time, because nobody teaches us this stuff yet. We're working on that, right, Radka, too. But I think when we're talking about being a parent in this scenario, we have to start on ourselves first, because children will go more by how we're acting and feeling. We might be saying all the right words to them, but let me tell you, and you will know this too, they will go by how you show love to yourself, how you act, how you are, your stress levels. That is how they will become, not from the words that you say. So if you're listening right now, it's this wake-up call for everybody. And I'll look there, wake-up call for you. Okay, if you think you're saying all the right things to your children right now, okay, let me tell you, if you aren't acting upon all of those yourself, forget the words you're saying. And I know that's hard to hear, but you have to start with yourself. It's so important, isn't it, Radka?
Oh, I'd absolutely second that. Absolutely second that, because, I thought I was doing all the right things. And then when things upset me and I got triggered, and there was this anger, which I was trying to shut down in my children. You can't be angry. That's not nice. And then there I was raging, because I hadn't dealt with my own emotions that I'd never.
And we try and suppress it, right? I can't be angry. They'll think I can't cope as a parent and stuff. And it's like, anger is a natural emotion when we've had these boundary ruptures. We're just not taught how to express healthy anger. There's one thing I want to go back to, because I think this is a really interesting point, because I think I'm so glad you mentioned this, because it's a sensitive topic around victimhood. Do you think, and again, I remember doing an interview with Sam Vaknin a number of years ago, and I agree with a lot of what he said. He's a self-confessed narcissist too, and I agreed with a lot. But the one thing I disagreed with him on was this whole victimhood choice of acting like a victim. And he was sharing on an interview I did with him that primarily women, when they stay in a place of victimhood after these toxic and abusive relationships, that it's a choice. It's a choice that we stay feeling like this. And this was the one thing that I disagreed. I said, it's not a conscious choice. It's an involuntary response. Because do you think actually victimhood, and this is how I see it, I don't know whether you feel the same, Radka, that sense, and I don't even like the word victimhood in some respects because it gives a sense of judgment to it, isn't it, almost with that? But do you think there's almost a sense of, and even maybe with this podcast too, there's a sense of finding your tribe, finding your community when you've experienced this? And sometimes the thought of healing means you have to come away from that community then, meaning, hold on, this is my family now. They kind of get me and everything else. Do you think, and I think I felt like this for a while as well, if I look back, that I almost didn't want to let go of this victimhood as such, because actually it was keeping me in a space of then a community, of being around others who understood me. And the thought of not having that felt quite scary in a way. The healing side felt scary.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, excuse me, if, you say choice and you say not conscious choice, I think it's that, protective mechanism. If I have this, if I can outsource the pain to someone else, I don't have to look at what's going on inside of me. And that's a safe space because you have never been able to do that.
Someone else's fault.
Yeah, it's always someone else's fault. And that's safe for your nervous system because it doesn't know how to look inside. It doesn't know how to take ownership. And to strip all of that off, it's really scary if you don't know what's on the other side, And,
I agree. I agree.
I was also thinking about that this morning, the cognitive knowledge of this has gone wrong and you can read everything, but to actually start embodying it, to actually start living the things that have been happening to you. Sorry, I'm losing track of what I'm saying, but it is.
It's recognizing all the things that have happened to you and not just thinking about it, but actually leaning into the embodiment element of it.
So that I think for me that was the final piece, and that only really happened in the last few months. Having all of that knowledge. But
But this is testament to you as well. I think I just have to point out, Radka, when we talk about victimhood, when we talk about staying in these relationships, and many do come out, and many will be listening now as well. They've come out of the relationship, but they still feel the sentence, I feel stuck, or I'm going backwards, or I'm this or that. It's because we're doing the wrong thing so often. And this was me, all the traditional things, counseling, psychotherapy, talk. Good for validating, good for seeing and hearing you in the moment. But you've got to work in the body. You've got to have that somatic piece in your healing, or it's just not going to happen. And I think when you're saying even in the last few months, this is testament to all your hard work of your awareness of this and sticking at it as well, because it's not easy work. It's not easy to heal because sometimes you have all of these parts of you not wanting you to heal, for you to stay in victimhood because it feels safer, to not leave because it feels safer. And it's really about understanding our own inner system and where those beliefs and core wounds have come from, and understanding in a non-shameful way, because there's no bad parts of us in that. And this is totally testament to you with your hard work, not only for yourself, but for your daughter. And also now, obviously, in doing all the training you're doing and wanting to make a difference with others, you should be we're all proud of you in our community, but you should be so proud of yourself and so proud of that little girl inside of you as well.
Thank you very much. And it is true, because you can read everything, you can talk about it, you can start learning what your emotions are and start naming the emotions, but unless you start letting yourself feel them and let them rip through you and leave you open and vulnerable, it's still just knowing. And it's not embodying. And for me, that was the biggest change.
And I think this is where safe spaces come in, don't they? I mean, again, anyone listening now, we've got a new Facebook community group called No Visible Bruises, and we'll pop the link in the show notes if anyone wants to come in, because it's, people at all stages of their journey. And, just because you are where you are at now doesn't mean you're not going to continue on your own healing journey, because we're human beings. There's always challenges and things like that. And, you are a real testament, I think, with where you've come from, what you have experienced, what you are now doing. And we call this, obviously, in positive psychology, post-traumatic growth. You really are the epitome of that, Radka, of going through everything that you've been through, but actually, because of all of that, going out in the world and doing good, helping people that are listening right now, working with people, helping and supporting them, lifting the shame, but from that nervous system level as well. Like you say, the missing piece, I think, as well, the physiology piece in all of this that is missing in a lot of the trainings, in a lot of the work around this. And that doesn't mean it doesn't help, but you've got to work at that level. That, for me, I was the same as you. It was the only thing that started to shift things for me.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for saying that. And it's very true, the community that we're in is amazing. And that's what supports your growth. That's what supports your healing. And I personally have been really lucky with the friends that I had around me before my marriage ended. And they're still my friends now. And they've been a huge support to me. I don't know where I'd be without them. Because, when I struggled with my daughter, my son as well needed
You'd be
help.
Good. You'd be good. Have faith in yourself.
But, practical help.
Yeah,
when you're the only person, like when you have no family around you.
That's tough, isn't it?
And, you've got 2 children. You need people around you to help. So, and these people my friends have been with me all along, and they've been amazing. And they don't necessarily understand what I do right now. So to have a community of people like you and all my co-students and everything is amazing, because knowing that kind of change and growth is possible for people is.
And they don't need to know either, do they? I think that's the thing. Our friends and family don't necessarily need to know, because we no longer, when we're working on our healings, are seeking that external validation, that we need them to see it. We need them to understand. We need them to validate us. You know what? We validate ourselves. We have a sense of self. We know we're good enough, and it's not on a spectrum, and we feel good enough. And I think they are the key things. So Radka, if you had, one piece of advice or power statement that you would like to leave with our listeners right now from your experiences, or what you wish you'd known, what would that be?
I don't know about power statement, but my piece of advice would probably be, if you feel things are not right, you're right. If it doesn't feel right for you, your body's telling you that it's not right, and don't listen to your brain telling you but yes, but this, but that. Listen to your body, because I hadn't, and all the signs were there, and I didn't listen, and
the butt brain. I love that. That could be like hashtag butt brain. It is, isn't it? You feel it. Oh, this isn't right. Yeah, but like, I love that. I really like that. And I think that's a great piece of advice for people too, because we switch off our feelings, don't we?
We really do. And like I say, you might not even understand them, and you may think, like what they say about these butterflies. Yeah. We are taught butterflies are a good sign that you're in the right place, whereas no, that's your body telling you wrong. Yes.
Sirens.
So, do listen. And I don't know how much time we've got, but I tell you one thing. What really triggered me leaving was I started seeing a chiropractor because my neck was so stiff.
The physical signs of abuse, not from being hit.
Couldn't move my neck, started seeing chiropractor, and then I started coming home, and then the usual things would be happening, and I would be like, nah.
Wow.
No.
You started to see the correlation that your environment was causing all of that.
And obviously, because we know that your throat chakra, that's where you speak your truth from your throat. And I started to realize, and that's what my chiropractor said, I don't know what you've done to me, I said to her, because right now I feel ready to leave that marriage. It's just like, yeah, but that's because you've been stuck in your neck the whole time. And
do you ever clench your jaw and grind your teeth at all with that? Because we often hold trauma around our jaw, our neck, our shoulders, and also in our hips as well.
My hips were shocking my entire marriage. My husband used to say, you need your own private doctor because there's always something wrong with you.
Wow.
You know,
yeah, you.
Well, I didn't know that. I had eczema all the time.
Inflammation of the body. We're in a survival response. And when we're in a survival response, all of the other systems in our body, they're not functioning effectively. Endocrine, immune system, digestive system, our skin, but we get a diagnosis for those. And very often we're not relating it. It's because we're in survival because of the abusive relationship we're in.
So you're healing one thing, but the trauma is starting to come out. So you get another thing.
The root cause is still there.
Yeah, so you end up having 15 different physical diagnoses and they just keep coming because it's your body trying to tell you you need...
The physiology side of it, that's what we should be talking about. Doctors, healthcare practitioners, if you're seeing people who have autoimmune disorders, digestive issues, any chronic illnesses, we should be asking, what is your relationship like at home? Where is this coming from? Because the body is giving us clues as to what's going on very, very often too.
Absolutely, it is. And so, that's the message. If your body starts to feel like something's not right, it might have a message for you.
Yeah, it is. If your body starts to whisper, act before it starts screaming.
Yes. Do not wait for the signier sign. One sign is enough.
Thank you, Radka. Thank you so much for joining me today. I know the listeners are going to get so much from this. And the biggest thing is hope that there's life beyond abuse, because there is. And I know you're making such great changes in the world with the work that I know you are doing. And I just want to say a massive thank you. We're so proud of you. And thank you for coming on No Visible Bruises.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's been an honor to talk to you about it. So thank you.
Thanks, Radka.